All right, joining us now on the Knightline podcast, a term we don't like to throw around lightly, but UCF legend quarterback Kyle Israel joins us now on the Knightline podcast. Thanks for joining us, Kyle. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon and about to head on my way out of the country tomorrow. So doing okay, but making my rounds and saying goodbye to my family.
All right, well, a Knightline podcast is a great place to do that. So so you're playing football in Poland, correct?
Yes, I'm playing American football in Poland. I am.
What is it like to play football in other countries, American football in Poland and Russia and Germany and all that stuff? What's it like?
I would compare it probably to what MLS was maybe 5 years ago, where you have niche fan bases. And, those fan bases are generally fairly diehard. But as far as the football goes itself, it's NFL rules. There's 4 to 6 Americans on each team. Only 2 Americans are allowed on the field at a time for each team. So on offense, you generally have 3 imports. On defense, you generally have 3 imports. And I was asked this question yesterday. It's probably similar to Division III football, I would say, is the best comparison I could give it. I've never played Division III football, but watching it, and a lot of the coaches of the football overseas are guys that have come over from like the Division III, Division II, 1AA ranks, and had a desire to travel and see the world, and at the same time kind of had the opportunity to do that through coaching. So it's a lot of fun. It's been a way for me to travel, see places I would have never seen, and basically football has just been a vehicle for me to get around the world here in my 20s. But my time's about winding down, though.
Yeah, that's understandable. I played a couple of years of semi-pro football, actually, semi-pro outdoor football after college. It seems like it's probably comparable. There were a lot of players that never played in college. There were players that played in the pros for a year. There were players that played in smaller colleges, so it seems kind of like that. And what are the fans like? I mean, do they embrace U.S. football over there?
The fans definitely do. Now, depending on the city that you're in and depending on the amount of money that the owner of the team has for any given team, that basically really dictates the size of the fan base. For example, in 2009, I played in Dresden, Germany, and we would average about 6,500 to 7,000 fans at a game. For a big game against one of our rivals, we would have somewhere in the realm of 18,000. And then there'd be a game when you're playing, like this past season in Germany, you'd be playing versus a team that nobody really cared about, and there would be 2,000 people there. So there's probably kind of like UCF was, as a matter of fact, through the 90s and early 2000s, you had UCF had their core of 15,000. Well, each team over there has their core of 2,500 who are diehards. And, I've had a few fans come and visit me in the States over the years and still stay in contact with a lot of them. And they come out to practices and make meals for you and welcome you in their home. So it's really kind of, for the fans that are the most diehard and that just really love it, it's fairly fanatical. And if you go to a city, you can see, teams have pictures of players on billboards, and there's advertisements around the cities for the games. And so, it's hard when you're removed and here stateside to really understand exactly what it is or what it's all about. But if you go and step into that world, it's basically, in my opinion, like the Orlando Predators in Orlando. You have, a few thousand fans that really like them, but everybody generally knows who the Orlando Predators are. It just happens to be indoor football. I would compare it to that overseas.
Have you ever thought about playing rugby?
It's never crossed my mind. I had a teammate in Kiel, Germany this past season who played in the NFL for 3 years with the Saints and with the Chicago Bears, and he was actually approached by a scout, running back, big guy, 6'1", 235, approached by a scout to play on a rugby team this upcoming season, and he's going to do that. And so I've talked to him about the process of what he's doing. But for me, rugby is not, so I don't even know the rules to the game, honestly. I don't even know how it works, but I'll tell you that I have a ton of respect for rugby players. It's always an interesting conversation when a guy that plays football and a guy that plays rugby gets together and tries to figure out which sport is more difficult. I think mentally, obviously, you go with football, but you got to give a lot of credit to guys that run into each other with no helmets on.
Absolutely. Those guys are insane, and they take it very, very seriously over there. So it's
good.
Really
short shorts.
Yeah. And some of them wear those little padded helmet things. Kind of looks like the old, leather football helmets, but I'm sure they're way more high-tech than that. But what about, like, equipment and stuff like that? Do you have good stuff over there, or do you feel safe playing football in Europe?
It really is done very professionally. We have equipment managers, we have general managers, we have team presidents, we have team owners, obviously. There's a coaching staff usually of about 8, which is similar. I think there's 9 in college football. So they take it very seriously over there, and for a majority of the teams, it is a business. And I don't know how much money they're making, but for those teams that are drawing fairly large crowds, there's some profit there. So they take it very seriously. The equipment is top of the line. There's no endorsements. There are no really, team cleats per se. Everybody kind of wears their own cleats, so you're not seeing anything like that. But as far as helmets and shoulder pads, really the only thing that really frustrates me, that I know is subpar to what we experience here in the United States is the officials. And the officiating of the games, you never know what you're going to get. Some games are good. Some games are horrible. I lost the playoff game in 2009. I threw a touchdown pass with about 7 seconds left to go, and an official, the side judge, threw a flag saying that the guy that caught the ball was actually covered up. He thought that the Z receiver was on the line of scrimmage and the tight end was covered, when it was very clearly obvious and that the Z receiver was off of the ball, so the tight end was eligible, and I hit him on a post down the middle, and we lost the game. So that rings a bell. But officiating, I would say, is probably the biggest difference and the most frustrating aspect of playing over there.
Well, it can be like that around here too, for sure, with officials, especially when we had those the replacement officials in the NFL. Maybe some of those guys are over there. I wouldn't doubt it.
It feels like it sometimes.
I read an article, like, trying to do a little bit of research on the Russia experience, of course, playing in football. And one of the articles, I think it was when you were playing. It was against another Russian team, and I think it was a playoff game. But they were talking about how the fans, a lot of the fans anyway, maybe some of the local people that just came out to do something, didn't really understand it. And there was a bunch of girls in the stands that got a hold of the word fumble for some reason, and they were screaming, fumble, fumble, every time that they could. So that I could see that, and it would have to be a little bit funny in a way,
Russia was a experience for me that was all-encompassing, and actually I decided to move there full-time. But the football aspect, my boss, who is technically still my boss, but he's been in prison for 10 months now for things he didn't do, but he wanted to build the game of football in Russia, and he wanted to create an international football league that would start in 2016. So I moved over there in February of this last year to help build that infrastructure for this league and set up the pipeline for American players to come over and play in Moscow. And we were going to do a reality TV show around the 80 American players that we initially brought over, and just really try to expose Russians to American football so that we could grow this league in the years to come. However, this past year, when they first brought Americans over for the first time, it was fairly funny because they put so much money behind this game. It was actually the first nationally televised American football game in Russian history. And there were about maybe 10,000 people at the game, but we had Skycam. It was fully done as far as a true, felt like an NFL professional broadcast. They actually did a documentary about the game itself and the preparation for the game and players coming over. And I don't know if you had heard this or have seen this since you've been doing a little research of your own, but my boss, Mikhail Zaltzman, was actually the Russian who offered to pay Tim Tebow $1 million to come over and play in 2 games.
I did see that.
Yeah, so he used that I think he knew Tim was never going to come, but he kind of used that as a PR attention grabber, and we actually had the U.S. ambassador to Russia. He was at the game, and he did the coin toss, and it was a big event. But the people in the stands, I guarantee you, had no idea what was going on because they were cheering and clapping at times that they shouldn't have been.
That's funny. That's cool though that American football is being shown and being played in other countries besides the United States. I think the NFL Europe thing, I'm shocked that they discontinued that because it was starting to be, a real kind of developmental league for American football. And so I guess if somebody can pick that up and roll with it, more power to them for sure.
Well, that's really the thing that we're missing, right? Major League Baseball players, once they graduate college or get drafted out of high school or whatnot, they have a farm system to develop. The NBA has the D-League, a farm system for these players to develop. But when you look at the NFL, sure, you could say college football is a developmental league for the NFL, but there's a lot of good guys that in their college career that could be really good NFL players with just a little bit more development. And I think that's what we're missing. Of course, you have the CFL, but those are completely different rules. Of course, you have arena football. That's a completely and entirely different game. So there's nothing here in the U.S., and I think that just the NFL and college football are such big monsters and giants in their own right and demand so much attention that, these teams and these leagues that try to start, like we had the Tuskers, the Orlando Tuskers here in Orlando a few years back, but nobody would go to the game. So what happens is the teams fold. So we wanted to create a way for one of the biggest things for me is just the life experience and perspective that I now have on the world based on being able to go somewhere and play football. So I was excited about being a part of this team to build this international league where I could pull Americans out of America, bring them to a place like Moscow, Russia, give them an opportunity to develop their craft, and at the same time, pay them fairly good money and expose them to other aspects of the world. And I think that, for me, was what I was trying to do and why I bought into what we were looking to do there in Russia. And unfortunately, because of the circumstances, that if you Google Zaltzman, Zaltsman, and the word Moscow next to it, you'll see everything that's happened to my boss. It's really sad, but it's kind of the way that Russian politics work. I wouldn't call them politics. I would say the Russian mob from Putin down. The people with the most money have the most power, period. And so that my boss was unfortunately arrested and put in prison and framed and all those crazy things, which led me to have to kind of escape about 12 hours after he was arrested. So, but yeah, it was a great idea. I wish that I was still there doing that, but people love American football around the world, and as you see the NFL making the move to London, playing 3 games there next year, those people over there travel from not just London. It's not just when those games are being played, people are traveling from all around Europe to go watch these NFL games or just tailgate or be a part of the environment. And I don't think, it's too far out, maybe 8, 10 years, 12 years, when you're going to see possibly a team make that jump overseas, because the one thing I find that are different in the fan bases is they are so fanatical. Now, you think of college football programs that have big fan bases, fanatical fan bases, and the same with NFL. But these people, the Europeans buy into their team so much that it is just straight religious for them. And so I think that there's ground to be made in regards to moving the NFL or any type of larger financially supported league into Europe.
There's been talk of the Jacksonville Jaguars, going over there because they're the ones that play the most games. They have their owner is a European guy, and he owns part of one of the big soccer teams over there, I believe. So I would hate to see that happen especially because Blake Bortles is here now and Storm Johnson on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I enjoy getting to see them play every week. But I would kind of hate to see that happen to that franchise. Maybe they could expand or something and put some teams over there.
Yeah, I think it would be something that would work.
Going back to the Knights here a little bit, Knight fans won't forget about you being behind the center for the opening of Bright House Network Stadium. What were your memories of that thriller versus Texas back in the day?
Well, I remember that it was scorching hot, extremely, extremely hot. And I know that the water fountains didn't work for the fans in the stadium, or there were no water fountains and they ran out of water. That was just a side note that always kind of, I think, is fairly funny. But for me, the thing that really is singed into my brain is the sounds that I heard when Coach O'Leary was just about to have our pregame talk about 4 to 5 minutes before we ran out of the tunnel for the first time ever in that stadium. You had never really known what that metal bleacher was going to provide as far as sound. And when you're sitting there in the locker room directly under the student section, it was so loud, and the sound that came from the stomping of the students' feet was something that I will never forget. So when people ask me that question, yes, I remember the game, and I'll go into that in a little bit, but the sound of the student section on top of that locker room is like anything, unlike anything I've still heard to this day.
It gives me chills just hearing about it, to be honest with you. It gives me goosebumps. I'm sure that it's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's not something that was just for that game. It's something that happens still every week that we play in that stadium when we have a good crowd. But you just didn't know what to expect at the time, obviously. And so to have heard that and having been working so hard all the way through the summer and fall practice in the anticipation of that game, and just coming off a huge win up at North Carolina State, you know, that you were kind of anticipating what this thing would feel like, and it surpassed all the expectations that I had.
UCF football has come a long ways since then, but you kind of were one of the players to usher that in. What do you think about what's going on now and where they've come from even from that point?
Oh, I mean, it's just been really remarkable. I think when you look back at 2004, my first season, we were 0-11, and we were playing 18 or 19 true freshmen. And, you know, I had a couple other offers out of high school, and it really came down to Florida State, Mississippi State, or Penn State for me, and UCF. And Coach O'Leary's vision of where he wanted the program to go, it was the selling point, because what did we have to offer at that point in time? We had a pretty new Wayne Dench. We were still playing at that time in the crappy Citrus Bowl downtown. The fan support was minimal at best. Like I said, you had your core 15,000 fans at that period of time. But you had this kind of feeling that the school was just about to explode. Educationally, the campus itself, the athletics program, it was like we're right on that brink. And then bringing Coach O'Leary in with his reputation in regards to winning football games at Georgia Tech and being back at Syracuse and with the Minnesota Vikings and all of the coaches that he had brought with him along the way, kind of had this anticipation about where this could potentially go. And so we really, really bought into that vision, you know, 2004, 2005, and 2006. To see us win that championship in 2007, Coach O'Leary told me, you know, in 10 years you're going to come back to help christen a new stadium. Well, this is 10 years. This past year was 10 years from when I signed my scholarship, and we did it in 4.
Yeah.
So to think of the timeline and what Coach O'Leary has done, there were some rough times. I know the fan base for a period of time was very hard on Coach O'Leary. Many people wanted him fired, but he is somebody that has seriously stayed true to what he was telling us players back in 2004, the vision that he had, and he hasn't wavered from that one bit. And I think that when you see a guy like Coach O'Leary do that, and the trust that Dr. Hitt and Todd Stansberry, Keith Tribble, and the other athletic director before that, the vision they've had with Coach O'Leary this whole time and staying true to what he wanted to do, to see us be and have the success that we've had over the past 4 to 5 years, winning 10 games, I think 3 out of 4 seasons or 3 out of 5 seasons, and winning the Fiesta Bowl in dramatic fashion against a team that was very good in Baylor. And even some of the ups and downs that we had this year, you can tell that the program is just at another level than it was. And certainly when I think back to games in 2004, 2005, when we had, you know, a measly 17,000, 18,000 people in the Citrus Bowl, or playing in front of a fan base of literally like 700 people at Tulane in the Superdome, where 700 people, it's like practice.
Looks like 4.
Right. So I think that he's done such a remarkable job, and the fan base, I think, has done such a remarkable job of buying into that vision now as well, because it was a little iffy there for a while. And when you mentioned that you moved here in 2010, you were kind of right on that cusp of seeing where this could explode to. And I think we're there now, and now we just have to be able to sustain that, which is the hardest thing to do. I mean, you look at South Florida, they were number 2 in 2007, ranked number 2 in the country, and where have they gone? There's a lot of programs that can't sustain, and I think that's got to be the goal and the vision for the future.
Yeah, and I think that that's very possible here. The fans really need to get behind it, though, and be there for every single game, no matter who they're playing. And that's a big deal to players, and I don't think a lot of fans realize how big of a deal it is. When I ask you what was your biggest remembrance of that, it was the sound of the fans, and that's huge. So what do you think about Justin Holman?
Well, he's got one heck of an arm.
He does.
I know that much. I haven't been able to be around Justin too much. I spent a lot of time with Blake. I spent a lot of time with Brett Hodges and Rob Calabrese and those guys back when I was a little bit more involved and had the time to be involved before I moved out of the country, but I hadn't been back around the program. So I'm going to have to give you my perspective from what I've seen in person at a game and television. I think that he's got incredible arm talent, a guy that certainly has the arm strength to play at the next level. It's sometimes difficult, I think, when you are the guy following a Blake Bortles.
Absolutely.
You're the guy. A lot of people don't realize how much pressure is involved with being the next guy in line to a guy like Blake Bortles, who goes number 3 overall in the NFL draft. Not to mention that Coach is very interesting and smart with quarterbacks. He makes it very difficult, and he treats the position like every other position on the field. If you're not good, if you're not playing well, he's going to be out of the game. I don't necessarily agree with the way that he does that, but sometimes it resonates with players. And you look at Justin Holman, he wasn't the starter going into Penn State, and he came in and rebounded in the second half of that game and really gave us a chance to win that football game. Some of the things that he's done over the season, and he's still a young player. He was only a true sophomore this year, and I think that he's a guy that can take us to a great season in the next 2 years. But he's just got to work, in my opinion, from a critical perspective, which I don't like to be because many people have been critical to me over the years. You heard all the commentators say all year, he's got to take something off and add a little touch to his passing game. And that's really crucial because you don't have to fire every ball in there. You can really take a lot off the ball by anticipating where you're going to throw the ball based on coverage, based on your read. And I think that is something that definitely has to come with time. And so what he's done so far, I think, is really good. What he did this season was really good for a first-year player. But he's got so much more to show, I think, and so much more to prove. And you'll see that maturation process naturally with Justin. And there's some really good players behind him. They're going to continue to push him. I don't think it's never really one guy's job unless you're like a Blake Bortles. Coach is always providing competition and pushing you. And I think that you're going to see some of these younger guys. I think Bo Schneider coming out of Texas is a really good quarterback, and his name's escaping me right now. Our third-string quarterback from this season, who's
Tyler Harris.
Tyler Harris.
That leads me into my next. We have some pretty good signal callers in the mix at quarterback. Is UCF becoming maybe a quarterback U?
I think that when we changed offenses back in 2009 with Coach Taff and what he did, because we were strictly pro style for most of my career, which for quarterbacks can be very difficult. It looks very bland to the naked eye, but when you're talking about audibles and checks and getting into the right plays at the line of scrimmage, it's very complex. But with what Coach Taff has done, spreading the football around and throwing more of a screen passing game and then taking shots down the field, quarterbacks want to be in those type of offenses. And what quarterbacks really want to do is throw to really good wide receivers. So I think there's a lot of great things about being a quarterback at UCF. The weather being one of them. You're not playing up in frigid temperatures, like some of these Big Ten schools. I think that's valuable. And, what Blake Bortles did for the program nationally, I don't know if we get a Tyler Harris. I don't know if we get a Bo Schneider without Blake Bortles. So it definitely can go in that direction. And now it's just Justin Holman's time to kind of lead that campaign and see what Tyler Harris and Bo Schneider can do behind him.
I think it's an exciting time. Definitely for UCF. There's been a lot of exciting times, and it just keeps building, like you've said. So besides playing quarterback in Poland, you're also a bit of an entrepreneur. What's the businessman Kyle Israel up to these days?
I was in the restaurant industry for a while, decided to make the move to Russia, which kind of brought me out of that. But I've just joined a part of a team I'm going to be the operating partner and assistant director of franchise development for a new fast casual franchise here in Central Florida. It's called Little Greek. We have 17 stores in Tampa right now. We have 4 in Austin, Texas, and we have 3 more in Arkansas. But I'm going to be a part of the team developing the 20 to 25 stores here initially in Central Florida. And it's basically a Chipotle style as far as the way that you order, but Greek. And American influenced Greek. Very healthy, very fast service. Everything's made to order. And the stores in Tampa, all stores actually, all 26, have done very, very well. And I'm excited about the future of that. So I'm going to go play in Poland. I'm a part of a team that's incredible because they're allowing me to go play football in Poland in kind of a crucial time. But I had signed this contract back in November before I joined them. So they're going to allow me to go over there. I'm going to stay in touch while we're building our first store, which is going to be in Waterford Lakes Town Center. And that'll be opening end of May, early June. Will be the first kind of store here in Central Florida. And then over the next 5-7 years, we're going to develop all 25 stores here. And then I want to join the corporate side and see if I can't be a part of the team that's developing these franchises nationally and internationally. So that's kind of my plan. I really am in a good situation right now to be doing what I love and playing football, having one more opportunity to kind of travel and live that lifestyle. But then I can draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this aspect of playing, Kyle, for you is over, and let's really dig in and make this franchise successful. So that's the direction that I'm heading in.
That's a good thing because a lot of players, they don't have their next choice of career figured out and what they want to do when the football time ends, because it always ends for everybody. You can't play football forever, and that's great that you had the vision to look ahead and see, that you could do something else as well. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'm going to be listening every week now.